Welcome to Clued in Mystery. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Brooke, and we both love mystery.
Hi, Brooke.
Hi, Sarah. Are you an art collector, Sarah?
I mean, we have some art, but I would not categorize myself as a collector or even particularly well informed about art.
Oh, good. We're starting from about the same place then. That's good news. Well, art may be created to inspire, to preserve beauty, or to celebrate culture. But in the world of mystery fiction, it often carries a darker weight. A priceless painting, a missing relic, a forged signature. These details can become the heart of a puzzle, the motive for betrayal, and even the cause of murder. Mysteries involving art and antiquities have captivated readers for over a century. From the golden age of detective fiction to today's best selling thrillers, authors have returned again and again to the galleries, auction houses, archaeological digs, and dusty attics where treasure and treachery often go hand in hand. Today, we're unveiling a conversation about mysteries set in the world of art and antiquities, where every masterpiece has a backstory and sometimes a body behind it.
Oh, great introduction. Thank you, Brooke. So, one of the things that I like about mysteries that feature art or antiques is because I know so little about that world, I feel like I learned something.
I have that thought too, that it's a kind of an educational read.
Yes, exactly. I read a series, I read it in the early 2000s, but I think it started in the early 1990s. This is by Ian Pears. And it features Jonathan Argyll, who is an English art expert, and Flavia Di Stefano, who is a police officer with the Italian Art Theft Squad. And there's a handful of books, four or five maybe, in the series. And I really felt when I read them that it wasn't I wasn't being talked down to as the reader, and to me that's a good sign, particularly if I'm reading about something that I don't really know about. Right, I wasn't being lectured to, but I was
Mhm.
learning a little bit about different different art pieces.
That's right, and also history, because you also can sometimes learn about the history or the artist themselves. So I enjoy that as well. I think this is a subgenre that utilizes the idea of a MacGuffin a lot. And we've only talked briefly about MacGuffins, but these are defined by Alfred Hitchcock as an object, a device, or event that serves as the crucial plot device to drive the story forward, but it's ultimately kind of unimportant or irrelevant in itself. And I think some examples are really helpful. So, not mystery world, but an example of a MacGuffin is like the One Ring in The Lord of the Rings, the Ark of the Covenant in Indiana Jones, Pee Wee's bike in Pee Wee's Big Adventure. It like drives the story, but in the end, it's not a real crucial thing. The Maltese
Mhm.
Falcon is a MacGuffin. And I think that we see that a lot. A lot of these stories, or maybe that's dealing with the missing painting, but then the result is somebody dies and it becomes a murder mystery. And so then the painting, although it kicked off the story, almost becomes irrelevant towards the end.
When I was thinking about books that I've read or shows that I've watched that kind of feature um, art or archaeology, often you get this insight into a world that is, people who have a lot of money. There's often a lot of luxury, glitz and glitter, it can be very, you're almost rooting for the criminals sometimes. In real life and in art crime, there often isn't a murder, right? Someone goes into a gallery and steals a painting. A lot of what we read, they incorporate a murder because that just drives the story forward a little bit. But I thought about Arsène Lupin and AJ Raffles, who we talked about in our Villains We Love episode. They were gentlemen thieves, and their stories were published in the early 20th century. As the reader, you're cheering for these bad guys, right? As they pull off these heists. And I just thought that was a really interesting feature of some of these stories.
Yeah, you're right on. The same thing that drew people to those manor house, drawing room, golden age mysteries, because it was a peek into this world of the, very wealthy. It's kind of the same thing that I think draws us to these art and antiquity mysteries. I this week I read one of the Daniel Silva books, and he writes about a art restorer sleuth, and but he opens the book with a quote from F. Scott Fitzgerald that says, "Let me tell you about the very rich. They are different from you and me." And it's just exactly what you were saying.
Yeah, because I'm not going to have any priceless art on my walls, and I can't think of any of my friends who do. But we all kind of can recognize the names of famous artists. And, when I was doing a little bit of research for this episode, I came across the name of Stefan Breitweiser. I don't know if you came across him. So he was a French art thief, and between 1996 and 2001, he stole 239 pieces to build his own art collection. Like, he just loved this art so much. Um, and there was a book that was published in 2023 that I think I might try and read that detailed his crimes, because his mother, apparently, when she heard that he was being investigated, she destroyed a lot of his collection. And one figure that I saw was that it was like $1 billion.
Oh no. All these priceless pieces of art.
Yes, yes. And then I guess he was rearrested in 2015 or 2016 because they discovered that there were some other pieces that he had stolen. I guess he didn't confess to everything.
Oh my goodness.
It's a fascinating story, and so I think I would like to read a little bit more about him. But uh, one of in reading his story, I was reminded of a statement that was made in one of the books that I read, that art crime, and particularly dealing in forgeries and kind of this underground art market, is like one of the biggest criminal activities that happens in the world.
Wow. Yeah, that's the other hand of it, right? You said this stealing these precious pieces of art, but the other side is the forgeries that take place. And that reminds me of a Netflix documentary. This was a 2020 show called Made You Look, a true story about fake art. And this is where the Knoedler Gallery in New York had forgers working for them and forged countless Rothkos, Pollocks, and other big names, and fooled collectors for years and years. So these people have these paintings, like you said, they're paying millions of dollars for these forgeries, and it finally came out. So so many opportunities to utilize this very high value resource.
You're right, Brooke. There's just a lot of different elements that can be drawn on to build a great mystery
Mhm.
in this subgenre. Agatha Christie wrote Murder in Mesopotamia, which came out in 1936 and is set in the Middle East. Hercule Poirot ends up investigating when um, a woman is found dead in the kind of living quarters as part of an archaeological dig. And I liked that story. I think I'd read it a while ago, but I listened to a BBC radio play version of it, and that was really fun. And one of the things that I really liked about the story is that she throws a couple of Easter eggs in there. At the end, Poirot says that he deserves a vacation, so he's going to take the Orient Express.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great.
Um, but these books are often set in places that, I've never been. So I read uh, a book called The Museum Detective, which was published this year in 2025 by Maha Phillips. And it's set in Pakistan and features an archaeologist and Egyptologist who is brought on by the police when a mummy is found. The big thing is that there was no evidence that in Pakistan that any mummies were ever buried because it doesn't align with the predominant religious beliefs. But I really enjoyed this book, and it was, super interesting to be immersed in a world that I've never visited. And I do really hope that it becomes a series.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I love a good Egyptology laced story. There's that learning, right? Especially when it's done well. Well, I think we often see a lot of these art mysteries as leaning towards the spy thrillers. That's certainly the case for the Daniel Silva series that I mentioned. It's his sleuth is actually an ex-spy who has like tried to live a quiet life as an art restorer, and of course adventures ensue. But, when I thought back to some of my reading, there are a lot of cozy mysteries that deal with art and collectibles as well. I think that that probably edges more towards that antiques that you were talking about.
Hmm.
And, Sarah, you and I both just recently read The Antique Hunter's Guide to Murder by C.L. Miller. And that's a great cozy uh, example of a antique and art mystery.
And there's a series that I've watched a couple of episodes on called Madame Blanc, and it's set in southern France in a community where there's several English expats. And she's an antique expert, and her knowledge helps solve crimes. So there's, because they're in southern France, there's a lot of older objects, and she ends up helping the police. It's definitely very light, not something that you need to be super super focused on when you're watching it, but it's set in southern France, so it's lovely to watch.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if you like historical mysteries, I also thought of the Tasha Alexander series. Then the first book, And Only to Deceive, is very much an art related mystery where
Hmm.
she discovers these things about her late husband's past and has to track down what really happened to these ancient art pieces.
I did read more of a domestic thriller that centered around art theft and art crime. And so this was The Paris Widow by Kimberly Belle, and it was released in 2024. So it's about a woman on the final day of a European holiday with her antique dealing husband. And just before they're supposed to leave for the Paris airport, there's an explosion and her husband goes missing. And she is thrown into investigating his life because the police tell her he's actually suspected of dealing in stolen works. And, they have kind of kept their lives quite separate, but she has to unravel what is the truth. And so it was yeah, much more of a domestic thriller type novel.
Wow, that could show up sometime as a What Would You Do title, Sarah.
G.K. Chesterton had a recurring character in several of his Father Brown short stories named Hercule Flambeau. And he also appears in at least one episode in each season of the TV series that you can watch. I've watched the TV series, and he is one of my favorite characters on the show. He pops in and out, always some sort of um, object that he's after. A great example of a MacGuffin, I think, in
Yeah,
in
uh-huh.
in these episodes. And he's an example of that kind of gentleman thief that I was talking about before.
That's great. And I just have to say, we know that G.K. Chesterton and Agatha Christie were acquainted, and he has a sleuth with the same first name and a rhyming last name. There's got to be a connection there. We've got to look into that, Sarah.
So I did look that up, Brooke, and there is a very strong suggestion that Agatha Christie's sleuth was named after Chesterton's.
Oh, that's so interesting. Look at that little nugget you uncovered.
Brooke, it has been so much fun to chat about antique and art mysteries with you. I think this is a subgenre that, despite the size of the criminal element in real life, um, doesn't get as much. I think there's more opportunity to explore it in mystery books.
I agree, and I hope that authors do it because I enjoy them very much. And we hope that you enjoyed today's episode too, listeners. Don't forget to go out and subscribe to our Clued In Chronicle, our semi monthly newsletter, so you can stay clued in. But for today, I'm Brooke.
And I'm Sarah, and we both love mystery. Clued in Mystery is written and produced by Brooke Peterson and Sarah M. Stephen. Music is by Shane Ivers. If you liked what you heard, please consider telling a friend, leaving a review, or subscribing with your favorite podcast listening app. Visit our website to sign up for our newsletter, The Clued In Chronicle, and get mystery news, podcast updates, and bonus episodes. We're on social media at Clued In Mystery.